Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Louis de Bruin. Is blockchain leader for IBM Global Business Services in Europe. Louis is driving many IBM blockchain programs where IBM works with companies that are world leaders in their industry to install inherent trust and dramatically improve transparency in the ecosystem in which they operate. One of these programs is global trade digitalization, aimed to reduce the flow of physical documentation accompanying goods and the time required to clear goods from source to destination. He leads a number of blockchain development projects and is also closely working with the Linux Foundation, Hyperledger, Fabric Effort, an open source technology used by IBM to develop many enterprise-grade blockchains. He has been appointed to the Strategic Advisory Board of the Center for Resilience Engineering of the 4 collaborating technical universities in the Netherlands. In his capacity, he advises companies on the use of blockchain in the attainment of Sustainable Development Goals and the Critical Infrastructure Protection Forum. Mr. de Bruin, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you, distinguished attendees. Great to listen to the previous presenters. They've mown away quite a bit of the grass that I was wanting to cover, but that's great because we have a meeting of minds here. And what I would like to do is focus in the end of my presentation on a very specific blockchain application that IBM has put in the market, IBM Food Trust, as you see here. And but prior to that, I would like to focus on some of the challenges that IBM is working with many partners and some of here at the table to make blockchain a reality. And where it really comes from. And it was mentioned before, of course, that Bitcoin is really the first application of blockchain that we know. Blockchain is actually a member of the technologies that we call distributed ledger technologies. Misha also mentioned that before, which is wider than just blockchain. Blockchain is a specific implementation of that. And it's actually much older than Bitcoin. I think many of you remember the file sharing services of the early part of this century and of last century, Napster, Kazaa, LimeWire. And they were typical examples of users coming together and bypassing existing market structures and sharing information on the internet. And that was a very dramatic development for the media industry and totally disruptive. So that was the first time really that we saw how powerful distributed ledger technology can be. Bitcoin was the next one, and that was more in the financial industry, transacting with each other using information that was all related to currencies and to value that is being transacted. And the interesting thing of these two examples is that they both were only focused on information. Media files, songs, films, financial information, it's just information. And that made them also relatively easy. I don't want to say play down anything of the complexity of these technologies, but it is much easier if you only deal with information on the internet than when you have to start to connect with the real world. And this is also what Michel mentioned and also Chris, when you come to real assets that you have to represent, livestock, as you also mentioned from the Karoo, and other objects. When you want to bring those into a blockchain, you have quite big challenges to make sure that what you are showing is actually the object that you are dealing with, sharing with everybody. So that's a major difference from the initial developments in blockchain, such as the distributed ledger technologies for file sharing and Bitcoin. However, we all saw that the opportunity is enormous, and they tackle issues that weren't wasn't possible to tackle before. Blockchain is a way to come together and deal with the enormous complexity of ecosystems that we nowadays have. It's probably the only way. Saying that the only way, they very closely work together, of course, with technologies like the Internet of Things, like not quantum computing, that will come in the future, but what I want to say is artificial intelligence. That's a very important one that also comes together. So it doesn't stand in isolation, but blockchain is a key element, key ingredient of solving these issues. So IBM has very quickly realized that the limitations of the existing blockchain technologies such as Bitcoin and some of the other ones made it difficult to create enterprise-grade blockchains. I won't go into detail on that, but it has been a reason that we have started to develop, during the introduction was mentioned, a technology called Hyperledger Fabric, which is adopted by the Linux Foundation, and it's the fastest growing project in the Linux Foundation ever. And it's an open source technology. So IBM has been at the start of this, and we have donated all our efforts to the Linux Foundation, and now hundreds of companies, organizations, large and small, are working together to make this blockchain technology probably the blockchain technology of choice for larger organizations. So IBM has been very much focusing on making blockchain work, and in our name is business, international business machine. So it's a combination of business and machines. And blockchain, the technology part, the machine part, so to speak, is, I don't want to say it's solved. It's a burgeoning technology, as also Mr. Plitziger mentioned. But a lot of these technologies have proven to work. We've seen that with the previous examples that have been given. But the real challenge is to make large-scale blockchains work. It's not so difficult to create a small app example and then say, hey, it works. But the real challenge is to make it really work for the masses. And that's really what we're trying to do. So major part of blockchain, the challenge of blockchain is to organize, and these sort of gremiums are very important for that we come together and find standards and approaches that we all rally about. This is also why we are a member of mentioned by Mr. Oldhoff, the International Association of Traded Blockchain Applications. We were one of the founding members of that because we believe that these sort of associations will drive the adoption of large-scale blockchains and avoid that we will stay with a landscape that is very scattered, with lots of small initiatives and that have little impact. That not to say that it's very good to have all these initiatives. It's very important that young people and everybody are starting to test these technologies, understand their impact, but this organization into larger solutions is very important. We see as an important driver to larger blockchain applications, the platforms that we are driving at the moment. Of course, I come to a moment to IBM Food Trust. But apart from that, we are also working on TradeLens, which is a application to do logistics. Those are the trade lanes really for logistics, for container logistics that are worldwide being used for transportation usage. It's typically in a situation where there is no one organization managing this process. And there are lots of organizations dealing with this. You have customs, you have banks, you have transportation companies, you have the final shippers and the final customers. So many organizations have to work together. This is not organized, and we see blockchain as a very good solution to do that. And we have hundreds of organizations already making use of this solution. And we started there also with working together with one of the incumbents in the industry, and that is Maersk. Maersk, large container shipping organization, if not the largest in the world. And by doing that, you make a ripple in the water, and not just a small one, but really a wave. And lots of organizations and companies say, well, if such an organization is doing this, then perhaps we should lend an ear to that and start collaborating with them. The same thing with Worldwire, an IBM financial blockchain application that aims to do clearing and settlement of payments, international payments, in a matter of seconds, and not as it is now, when it takes weeks and you don't know exactly how much you pay for it. So that's another application. And of course, IBM Food Trust. And with IBM Food Trust, we very quickly partnered with large organizations, the first one being Walmart. Walmart, of course, the largest retailer in the world, but here in Europe also with Carrefour, for instance, also a very major retailer. And this makes that you start to make this large wave, and not just in a little pond, but really in the ocean, and see many people and organizations working together. And that's really the goal of blockchain, to get as many parties working together. Now, the technology that IBM is using is not the open technologies such as Bitcoin and Ethereum mentioned before. Nothing wrong with that, but we have chosen for the Hyperledger Fabric usage of that. And that is often referred to as a permissioned blockchain technology, and that's correct. That should not be confused with a private blockchain. These blockchains are not private. Just like you use your mobile phone and you will be working with Vodafone or any other organization, that doesn't mean that they're not open. They can all work together. And there's also not, we don't expect there to be a mother of all blockchains, that IBM Food Trust is necessarily the only one, but it's going to be one of the major ones that will work together with others. And for this reason, we are also working a lot in standardization on interledger protocols that blockchains and other systems will work together. Without further ado, I want to dive deeper into IBM Food Trust and give you a short overview on what IBM Food Trust does. So it's aimed at one of the most personal elements that we all have. We all eat every day. We serve food to our dearest, and we want to be sure that that food is right. We mentioned before that that doesn't contain elements that you don't want, and also that it's fair traded, and preferably also with as low as possible a carbon footprint as possible. So these are the enormous aims that we all set with IBM Food Trust. But every large voyage starts with a small step. And so we really made real steps, and IBM Food Trust is available as we speak. So the overview, end-to-end global traceability and transparency and efficiency. That's really the overall goal. That's what we heard from everybody so far. And creating a trusted connection, and this trust is so vital because there is not a trusted third party that we all can rely on when we are dealing with not tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, but even millions and billions of participants and on a blockchain. There is nobody who can check this. So there is this mechanism of having a immutable ledger that actually provides trust for all of us is absolutely vital. And the focus of this is really the consumer, because we are altogether the final reason why economy is driven. It's all for the end consumer. We eat it. Very important is the use of existing standards. The last thing we want to do is build new things that have to be done. There are very valuable existing standards in the world. GS1 is one that we have worked with from the very early phases. IBM is one of the developers also of the barcoding technology. So that sort of existing standards for interoperability and creating connectors with existing systems and new systems are vital to create food safety. Food safety is about very specific use cases. Some have been already mentioned, so track and trace, traceability, but also food recall. If something is wrong, then that you as quick as possible can recall it. And one of the first applications that we have is actually on certificate management. It's been mentioned before, for instance, to have the lamb that you mentioned certified as being the lamb that you want. Ideally, you want to have crypto anchors that would really specify piece of lamb that you will buy in a supermarket, that it is that lamb that was mentioned. But in the way up to that, we can start with things like certificate management, that you know who issued that certificate certificate is not copied, that it's unique, and that you can always go a step back or a step forward in the chain to check that the product that has been delivered is actually the product that was, and that you can hold somebody accountable for that. That's very difficult at the moment. Certificates have that goal, but often certificates are used to exempt yourself from errors. If something's not right with the product, you say, yeah, but I had a certificate, look at this. But now you can't get away with that anymore, because a certificate is immutably lodged into the blockchain, and only if that certificate is available in your hand, you can say, I know absolutely sure that this product comes from somebody, and that person can be held accountable as well. So that's a step forward, step back that you always have to do in the blockchain, and we want to move further and further back, all the way up to the ingredients that were used to nourish an animal, or to make produce grow, for instance, to make also that part of the blockchain. So here you see a couple of names that are already taking part in this IBM Food Trust event. There are more than that, just these, but you see these are major players that are also asking from their suppliers to use the blockchain technology. So by this you create that ripple effect, very similar to what happened with the internet. As Chris mentioned earlier, 25 years ago there were perhaps 100, 200,000 organizations on the internet, and now there are billions of devices, people all the time using it. So that's the thing we want to achieve. It's a hockey stick effect. In the beginning it's slow, and then all of a sudden it takes off, because if the oil spill is big enough, many organizations will do. So this is all about food safety worldwide. IBM Food Trust certifications, as I mentioned, is the first use case. It's already available. Organizations can at the moment simply log on to the IBM site and become part of this offering, and digitally manage and share their food certifications with their suppliers and with their customers. To end with this, really the goal, the very ambitious goal that we all set with blockchain, it's not about a few, it's about the 2.7 billion customers that purchase food and put it on the table for all citizens in the world. It's about the 600 regulators that are involved in this, over 570 million growers, the million food suppliers, all the food processors and retailers available. So millions of participants that every day make use of it. And already at this moment we see millions of transactions taking place as we speak. So that's really what I wanted to share with you, and thank you very much for your attention.